Hi friends, welcome to another video in our series on logical reasoning from Edupedia World, and the topic that we will be covering today is puzzle test. Now in puzzle tests we'll basically be seeing a lot of different logical puzzles where we will be given information and we have to fit all the data into a table, primarily represented in a tabular form, and using those clues we have to arrive at the answers. So to understand this concept, let us take a look at an example. So in this example on your screen, you see that there's a puzzle given to you, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clues that you have to use to arrive at the answer. So first of all, let us read this. Let's see what they're saying. It says that at a fancy dress party, people were asked to dress as an object that represented their professions. So Mr. Abhijit, Mrs. Banerjee, Mrs. Chatterjee, Mr. Dipanjan Dey, and Mr. Elangovan were among the guests. The costumes included a leaf, a pen, a fork, a camera reel, and a stethoscope. It goes on to say that the professions included a photographer, a gardener, a compounder, a teacher, and a cook. So if you see this question, there are 3 types of information given to you. First of all, you have the names of the people. Then you have clues about the costumes that they're wearing at this particular party. And finally, you're given their professions. And another clue that you have is they are wearing a costume that is related to their profession. So that makes our job quite easy. I just have to figure out either the professions or the costumes, and I'll figure out the remaining automatically. What do I mean when I say that? It's pretty simple. If a person is dressed as a leaf, obviously that person is the gardener. The person who is dressed as a pen is a teacher, of course. The person dressed as a fork is bound to be the cook. The one dressed as a camera reel is the photographer, and the person who is dressed as a stethoscope has to be the compounder. So using this information, it has made my job easy. Now let us take a look at the clues. First clue says that Mr. Abhijit is a teacher. Okay, that means of course he has to be dressed as a pen. Then I know that neither Mrs. Banerjee nor Mrs. Chatterjee was dressed as a fork. Now guys, I hope as we are reading this question, you are making this table and you are tabulating the data that we are discussing. So neither Mrs. Banerjee nor Mrs. Chatterjee was dressed as a fork. So that means one of the men, either Mr. Dipanjan Dey or Mr. Elangovan, is dressed as a fork, and of course he has to be the cook. Then I know that none of the men is a compounder. So I know that either Mrs. Banerjee is the compounder or Mrs. Chatterjee is the compounder. Clue number 4 tells me that Mr. Dipanjan Dey is dressed as a camera reel. So now it's even more easy for me. I know that the women are not dressed as a fork. So Mr. Abhijit has already been designated as a teacher. So of course the fork is either Dipanjan Dey or Mr. Elangovan. Now I know that Mr. Dipanjan Dey is dressed as a camera reel. So of course Mr. Elangovan has to be dressed as a fork. So that means Mr. Dipanjan Dey is a photographer and Mr. Elangovan is the cook. So I have sorted out the mystery about Mr. Abhijit, Mr. Dipanjan Dey and Mr. Elangovan. Let us see about Mrs. Banerjee and Mrs. Chatterjee. So clue number 5 clears that doubt for me. It says that Mrs. Chatterjee is a gardener. So of course she will be dressed as a leaf, and that leaves Mrs. Banerjee as the only option for the compounder, and she will be dressed as a stethoscope. So very neatly we can put all this information into a table: person, profession, and costume. So I know that Mr. Abhijit is a teacher and he of course is dressed as a pen. Mrs. Banerjee has to be the compounder, dressed as a stethoscope. Mrs. Chatterjee is the gardener, and she is dressed as a leaf. Mr. Dipanjan Day will be the photographer, dressed as the camera reel, and Mr. Elangovan, the cook, will be dressed as a fork. So that completes my table. Now, using this information, I can answer whichever question is thrown my way. So let us see what are the questions asked along with this data set. So the first question is that which person is dressed as a stethoscope? And I have four options: Abhijit, Banerjee, Chatterjee, or Dipanjan Day. So let me quickly refer my table. And I know that Mrs. Banerjee is dressed as the stethoscope. So I'll go ahead and select option B. Mrs. Banerjee is dressed as a stethoscope. And question 2 is, what is Mrs. Banerjee's profession? Of course, she is dressed as the stethoscope, so she has to be the compounder. And what is Elangovan's profession? Elangovan is the cook, I saw from my table. So if you see, friends, the key to these puzzle tests, to solving these puzzle tests, is to ensure that first up you make a very clear and concise table. In that table, just fill in all the information. After that, it becomes very easy to answer these questions. It doesn't take any time at all. So with that, we'll finish this part of the video, and I'll have a part 2 of this. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you in second part of this video. Thank you.